Hi, hello there, my name is John Caju, Humber suit number N01003690, and this is the production of smoked salmon for the Certified Master Chef program. I have my apprentice here, William Horswell, who's going to be watching what we're going to do here and do some training. And we're going to take you through the steps of making cold smoked salmon. Let's just discuss the process firstly. We're going to first look at our salmon, and we're going to discuss the sort of the health and safety issues relating to that salmon, from delivery temperatures to storage temperatures. We're going to assess the quality of that salmon. After that, we're going to fillet the salmon. We're going to salt it for about 6 hours. We're going to wash that salmon off, clean it nicely. Then we're going to place it back in our fridge, and we're going to leave that dry for about 12 to 24 hours, depending on the velocity of air we have in our fridge. And what that does is build up a pellicle on the outside of the salmon skin, and that allows, it's like a tacky sort of texture on the top of the skin, on top of the flesh as well, and that allowed the ability for the smoke to retain the flavor and to really penetrate the salmon skin. And then we're going to cold smoke it. So one of the most important things to think about when you're producing food for restaurants or hotels or old folks' homes for that matter is the health and safety aspects and the way that the food is produced, and the hazard points that are looked at during the receiving, the production, and the serving of those goods. So, for some products like tinned goods and dry stores, the hazard points aren't as critical, but for fresh foods, and especially fresh seafoods, they are very, very critical elements to look at. So, the first thing you want to make sure is that you're buying it from an approved source. That fish was either farmed or caught in an approved, safe, and healthy manner. Secondly, you want to make sure that it was stored properly, cleaned properly, and delivered to you in a timely fashion in a very, very clean environment. So you want to make sure that the van driver's in good shape, not overly scruffy, your hands are clean, the fridge in the back of the van is clean, the temperature is proper. So make sure that it arrives when the restaurant is open, so you can have a quality assessment when it arrives. You make sure that you store it properly in a fridge, ideally on the seafood section of a fridge. Make sure you store it below cooked foods. Make sure it's well ventilated, and make sure you use it up in a reasonable amount of time for production. You don't want to hold it for any time longer than a couple of days. Ideally for smoked salmon, you want to produce it as soon as you get it, because the process does take some time, and the sooner that process begins, the better the end product will be. So now we have our health and safety out of the way. We made sure that it's all been received properly. We made sure it's been stored properly. We've got all our tools in place. Now we're going to take a look at the fish. So what we have here is an Atlantic salmon, and the first thing you do when you're looking at a piece of fish is make sure that it looks good. So it's free from blemishes, from cuts, or any sort of outside markings. So that's the first thing that we look at when we're doing that. The second is the color. Is it vibrant color? Is it got good sheen on it? Is it a good looking fish? This is actually a very nice looking fish. So the third thing that we check are the gills. We want to make sure that they're nice and deep red, and they're free of excessive amounts of scum and slime, and they're a good color, and there's no off smells from those gills. The other one we check now is the eyes, to make sure they're not sunken, they're bright, they're responsive, not responsive looking at you, but you can give them a tap and they will pop back out. They're not sunken or faded or anything like that. We also look at the general smell of it. We don't really want a fish to smell like fish. It's one of the only products that you don't really want to smell like what it is. So what we do is we smell the cavity, we take a look at it, what can you smell there? Make sure that's nice and fresh. It should have a slightly salty and fresh sort of from the sea sort of aroma to it. This is actually a very nice looking fish. We look at the texture of the flesh, make sure it's nice and responsive, that it bounces back to our touch. And then lastly is the scales. Make sure that the scales are still intact, they're not coming off very easily, and they're in really good shape. So you want to check all those things. So now that we've assessed the quality of our fish, we're going to move on to filleting. There are a number of ways to fillet a fish, and the most important thing to do is do it however you feel comfortable. Some people take it from down the spine of the fish, but I don't really do it that way. I like to get from the front side, because I find I move the fish less, and I have a good result in the end. So usually when I'm going to be filleting a fish, I'll come up on the pectoral fin, and I'll cut down to the spine, and I'll come across. But because for smoked salmon, I'm going to hang the smoked salmon, because I find with the hanging the smoked salmon, rather than traying it in a smoker, you're going to remove some of that extra oiliness of the fish, and have a nice, really nice palatable product that ends up really nicely in the end. So I'm going to take it in a little bit underneath the pectoral fin, on the front side of it, and I'm going to cut all the way down. So first cut we're going to make is going to come down. As soon as we reach that spine, I come across and I move my fish very little, and I do the knife left do the work. So I come across, and I got a very nice side of salmon. So I'm just going to put that over here for now. So I've got the one side down, and now I turn my fish over. Again, I'm always gentle when I'm doing my fish, because the fish can tear very easily, and you can pull the fibers apart. So when you're dealing with fish, don't hold it right in the middle. Make sure you grab it properly and turn it over very, very gently. Now I'm going to do the same procedure again from the other side. And now we're going to do the secondary cleaning, removing the pin bones and the belly. So again, very, very gentle with our salmon meat. When I'm taking off the belly, I try and explain it to my staff is, I never use any kind of sawing motion with my knife, because you know, if you look at a fish, they're not going like this back and forth. They're very, very gentle in their approach and their movement. So I try and tell people to approach the fish in the same way, and approach their knife handling skills in the same way as well. So what we're going to do is take off the belly, and we do it in a very, very gentle motion, and try and keep it as fluid as possible. So we've taken off a lot of belly meat there. We're not going to take it off all the way, because we're going to do some post trimming after we've smoked. But we want to take out a good bit of that. So again, taking it off, trimming it down. And obviously we want to take off as little as possible, because it's all money. It's going to be not used anywhere else. So the less we trim, the higher our yield. So we can always scrape down any excess that we've had there, and use it for the rillettes afterwards, the salmon rillettes. So at this stage, I'm not going to take off too much more than that, because I'm going to trim it after my smoking. But what I do want to do is take off the pin bones. The pin bones run right down here. Now you can go from the front side or the back side. It's up to you. It's a matter of personal preference. I'm going to start from the back side, and you just basically take those little bones up and flip them up so they can come out very nice and easily. So take that out one by one. Keep one hand free to grab your bones and pin it with the other hand. A good indicator of freshness, if you've already done your primary assessment, your pin bones, if they remove too easily, it's usually a sign that your fish is not as fresh as it should be. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If they release very, very quickly, the fish isn't as fresh as you want it to be. So there we have our bones. Now we just put in a little bit of water. So if we double check it, we have a little bit of discoloration there. So we're just going to trim that off very, very gently and remove that. So there's our first salmon ready for salting. So again, very, very gently, place that in my pan. So now we've gone to we've got our fillets, we've removed the pin bones. Now we're going to cure it or salt it. Again, like I said earlier, there are many ways of salting it. You can add a salted sugar, a salted brown sugar, a little bit of molasses, some beetroot, some herbs. Like I mentioned again, we are working on a one for London, which will have juniper berries and gin. But for this one, we're just going to do salt. And then the salting time just varies on sort of the style of fish that you want to have, the palatability of it, and how you want it to be received. You don't want it to be too salty, but you want it to be to remove some of that moisture and to accept the salt, accept the smoke properly. I use a kosher salt, and we're going to do it for about 6 hours. So what you want to do is put a generous coating on the bottom of your pan to make sure that your skin gets well coated. Try not to use any salt with iodine, but a kosher salt is always good. So again, very, very gently with my sides. Right on the salt. I'll face my one the other way. Make sure it fits properly. sure it's all touching on the bottom, and then I'll give a good covering of it as well. So we've been in the fridge now for about 6 hours. We've been salting. You can see some of the moisture coming out of the salmon. And now what we're going to do is going to rinse off that extra salt and rinse it off very carefully. Again, always handling it very carefully. Just remove some of this excess salt. It's very nice and moist now. We've removed a lot of moisture from that salmon. And again, very, very gently into a deeper pan this time. You'll see why we're doing that in a second. So now we've got a deep hotel pan. I'm going to turn on some cold water and rinse our fish off. Just put it right in the corner of your pan. Don't allow the water to hit the salmon directly. Just very, very gently let that salt come off the salmon. Just gently. You can feel the crust on it right now. I've actually got 2 pans here. I've got my main pan here soaking with the salt water. Now I'm going to remove it into my second pan that I have over here. And I'm going to put them in there to further rinse them off out of the salty water, to remove any excess salt they might have. So now we have to clean and dry our salmon. We have a very nice clean tea towel. And we have our tea towel, and we have another rack, and we also have a stainless steel drying rack on this. So when we put it in the fridge, we can have good air circulation, and we have proper pellicle formation around the whole salmon. So now very, very gently removing the salmon. With bits of cloth and on our rack. So here we are the next morning. Our salmon's been in the fridge for about 16 hours now. It's got great pellicle formation on it. Again on the bottom side as well because we dried it out on the rack. Today we'll be using a Bradley smoker. So I have 3 kinds of wood chips today. I've got a cherry, an apple, because we're from Canada, a little bit of maple. So it'll be very little maple because it is a hardwood and it does add a lot of flavor to it. So it'll just be sort of every 4 or 5 pucks we'll put in a maple just to get that flavor. We're going to add a little string right under the pectoral fin to hang it in our smoker. Because as I said before, I like to hang my salmon. So here we are in our smoker. Like I said, we've hung it up here. So we have a really nice sort of drawing of the fat at the bottom. I've got some ice in the smoker to keep the temperature as low as close to 38 degrees as possible. And we're going to smoke this for the next 4 to 6 hours, checking on it from time to time, changing the ice and making sure that everything's going along well. So we're going to close the door and let it smoke. So now we're out of the smoker now. We've been in there for about 6 hours. The smell is fantastic. The texture is fantastic. And now we're going to do a quick presentation. So when I cut my smoked salmon, I don't really like the very, very fine slices. I like to have a slightly thicker slice, and it makes a really nice presentation. It also makes for a really nice flavor on the plate. You get an idea of the texture a lot better, and the depth of flavor in that salmon. This salmon will hold in vacuum pack for about a week, but obviously the quicker you use it up, the better for everybody. We do have a little more addition to our plate today, and that's a little bit of the salmon rillette. We took off all that trim from our carcass last night. We made a little salmon rillette. A little bit of mayonnaise, a little salt, a little white pepper, some chives, and a little touch of green peppercorns, and a little bit of lemon juice. I'm going to finish that off right there. A few slices of fine red onion, and some chives. A very simple presentation. Let the flavors speak for themselves. And I know it's an oily fish, but I love to finish my smoked salmon off with a little bit of olive oil. It adds depth of texture and depth of flavor. Serve that with a nice toasted rye or some pumpernickel. And there we have a presentation of smoked salmon for the Certified Master Chef program.